Hello everybody, welcome back to the Healthcare Tales YouTube channel. Now this is going to be another longer episode, as you can probably see based on the time card. It's going to be more informal, sort of like a podcast style, I think. My goal is to make more videos with some more interesting content, but with the traditional ones, it takes a little bit more time. So I think something like this is sort of get the same point across using a longer timestamp, I guess. So anyway, definitely not going to be edited, as you can tell, the ums and the and the pauses, but that's cool. Yeah, it's going to be super relaxed and super cash. Yeah, anyway. So I have a few articles that I kind of want to talk about. The first one I just sort of briefly glanced over. I didn't read it word for word because I wanted it to be more of a natural reaction to how I read it. And I think I can probably give some pretty interesting insights. So like I said, it's going to be completely unedited and just normal conversation sort of thing. So it might be, I don't know how long this is going to be. It might be half an hour, it might be an hour. Not sure how often I'm going to release these, but the goal is so I can post a longer, maybe an hour version, and then make bite-size cut-up episodes so I can be pumping out more content more frequently. If people don't like the longer episodes, at least if I can hone down to a 10-minute cut, which people would be interested in watching, then that's what we're going to do. So anyway, without further ado, this first one from Medical News Today, I'm going to actually post all the links in the description, so if you actually want to read the original article, you can. This one is called Anxiety in the West. Is it on the rise? Now, dealing in healthcare and just being aware and listening to the way people talk, it's quite obvious that the frequency of anxiety, or at least how often people are talking about it, is rising. That should be no shock to anybody, especially if you live in the West. So, anyway, let's start by reading this one. So, for many, anxiety is an ever-present, uninvited guest in our circle of friends, amongst family members, and communities at large. It seems to be rampaging through society like a non-contagious cognitive plague, forming low-level hum that hides in the corners of our collective minds, which is kind of a fair description. I guess I can tell you a little bit about myself. I don't really suffer with anxiety at all. I used to growing up, like teenage, but I think that's, when you're a teenager, you sort of go through mood cycles and lack of confidence and sort of things like that. But as I've gotten older, I've matured a little bit, sort of like a wine or a scotch. With age, you just sort of learn things and you get better. You get better with age. And I think part of that is getting over anxiety, for me anyway. You sort of realize what's important, and that there's no sense in being anxious. I don't want to say that you can just shut it off, like as if you can, I don't know, just hold your breath, something like that. You can't just turn that off. But I think it's got to come from within, and I think maybe with time people can get over it. But that's neither here nor there. So, let's see. In August 2018, Barnes & Noble, who are the largest book retailers in the United States, announced a huge surge in the sales of books about anxiety. Not really surprised. A 25% jump on June 2017. We may be living in an anxious nation, one press release dryly noted. So, again, self-help books, people love those. People are obviously reading about anxiety. That just goes to show how big of a topic that is. People think they have it. But let's continue. Does the surge of interest... Oh, sorry, my computer's being a pain. There we go. Does the surge in interest reflect a genuine spike in anxiety, or people simply more aware of it? And that's a fair point. Sometimes you might be like, as we get more aware of technology and as we learn more about us, we kind of figure out things or why things are that, and maybe that problems that people had a long time ago, they just never thought about it, or they didn't know what it was, so we assumed it never existed. But now we do know that this thing is a thing, so maybe that's it. And if wealthier nations are bearing the brunt, and why anxiety seems to be sitting in the driving seat of modern society. Many of us, surprisingly high percentage, as we shall see, are too familiar with how anxiety feels. For those who have not experienced anxiety firsthand, through the text, we have added experts from personal experience. Okay. Now, the article says, what is anxiety? It's a term that covers a great deal of psychological ground. It's the thinnest end of the wedge. Before an exam or in a job interview, we might feel anxious. This is both understandable and normal. It's not a cause for concern. Anxiety is a normal thing growing, or if we look at evolution, anxiety sort of, it was a factor that allowed us to know that we were in a dangerous situation. It's an evolutionary advantage. If you go into something and you're like, your gut's not quite telling you something, there's a good chance that something bad's going to happen. Now we don't really have to deal with those life-threatening things, but a job interview, it's the same. It creates the same psychological response than we did millions of years ago when we were, hunting wildebeests or whatever. So anxiety is only a problem when it extends beyond logical worry in unreasonable, unwarranted, uncontrollable way. Situations that should elicit no negative emotions all of a sudden seem life-threatening and crushingly embarrassing. Okay, so there's a little bit more, but I'm not going to read over that because it is a long article. Let's skip down here. When anxiety is a person's primary symptom, it may be referred to as general anxiety disorder, or GAD. So GAD affects, I guess, around 6.8 million people in the U.S., or more than 3% of the country's adults. Again, according to this article. Another common form of anxiety is social anxiety, which affects people more specifically in social situations. Now, this is sort of the thing that I self-diagnosed, quote-unquote, myself when I was in high school and even university a little bit. But this is where I think people jump and assume that this is what happens. Now, when I was in high school, I assumed that because I didn't want to go to a party that I had social anxiety disorder. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that's bullshit. Thinking back, I didn't want to go to the parties. It wasn't because I felt awkward, or it wasn't because I didn't have confidence, or because I was scared to talk to people. I just didn't care to. And I guess the idea of me not wanting to made me assume that I had some sort of anxiety problem, that I couldn't talk to people. So again, that's one of those things that is it not. And then sometimes it's just, I think intelligence has a huge thing to do with this. And this is going to sound a little bit cocky, but if you have no interest in hanging out with people who are just getting drunk or doing a bunch of pot, and just, if you have you just don't mesh on that level, you're in a different realm, and you would much rather do intellectual things that stimulate your mind, then you're going to feel like you're odd, or you're going to feel like you're different. But I think that's what a lot of people sort of have, from my experience, what they might relate to. So it might make someone very self-conscious, perhaps not wanting to eat, drink in front of others, fearing that people are talking about them or worrying about a loss in a crowd. Okay, that's a little weird. Yeah. I can't say I ever felt like that. Today's anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S. Almost 1 in 5, according to this. And like I said earlier, this article now talks about that anxiety is not just a human experience, and it's actually an evolutionary advantage. It ultimately allows us to connect with other animals, and humanity's survival relies on our natural ability to feel anxious and about genuinely dangerous situations and to be on guard. So every sort of feeling we have, everything that humans like possess, why we are the way we are, usually has to be answered in some sort of evolutionary advantage. That's why we're here. That's why we are the most successful species on Earth. There's no other species that is superior than us. We are the top of the food chain in many situations, up to the point where we're killing each other over psychological reasons. But anyway, so we are the top dog, and I'm going to sort of touch on that a little bit later too. That's sort of us being on top and sort of where to go from now. So yeah, when it's a life-saving mechanism, it's fine, but then people get stuck on this position and it becomes a problem in non-important situations. So the big question is anxiety really affecting us more now than it has in the past? Is it on the rise in the West or just modern society? Yada, yada, yada. Okay, so is anxiety more prevalent in the West? So according to this article, they say that one might expect that mental illness tends to be more common in the areas of the U.S. that have lower socioeconomic status, that anxiety might also be prevalent in countries with lower socioeconomic profile. However, they found that was not the case. So if we go down a little bit more in the article, it breaks down low-income countries, 1.6%. Sorry, this is for general anxiety disorder. So low income, 1.6%, middle income countries, 2.8%, and high income countries, 5%. So what this is saying, that at least in terms of countries, that we have higher levels of general anxiety, the better or the higher income you have. Now, this is something that I'm going to actually talk about, and I think the article does go and talk a little bit about this later, but I'm going to jump ahead and sort of base my assumptions sort of on this. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm just going to pull up the pyramid right here. For those who don't know what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are, it's pretty simple. It talks about the hierarchy of humans' needs. So it's like a pyramid, like a triangle. So at the bottom, it's physiological needs. Sorry, let me just open this up so I can see it a little bit better. See, this is uncut. We're going right off the whim. We're just rolling with the punches. Okay, shit, where'd it go? There it is. There we go. Okay, so as I said, yeah, physiological needs at the bottom of our pyramid. They're our base of our pyramid. They support us. Without these physiological needs, we die. That includes food, water, warmth, rest. If you don't have food, you die. No water, you die. You get it. So it's a basic need. And then the one just therefore after is security needs, safety needs, which is security and safety. So those are our basic needs. If we have food, if we have water, warmth, rest, and we're safe, we will survive. That's, and that's sort of where most humans sort of reached. This is where most people sort of stayed in for the history of human existence. Most people never got to the point where they had things. It was a constant struggle. They had to always make sure that they were fighting for food, clean water, at least in the West. We generally have all the food and water and the warmth we could ever need. You go down to the grocery store and you can get food. It might not be the most healthiest food, but you will be able to find food. Feed yourself for less than probably $10. Or you can go to the dollar menu at McDonald's, and like I said, it's not the highest quality of food, but you will not starve. Clean water. You turn on your tap. There's clean water, unless you're in somewhere like Flint, Michigan. Look it up if you have no idea what I'm talking about. But most places in the West has an abundance of clean water. And then safety. Homes. You might not own your home. You might not even be able to get a mortgage, but most people at least they can rent, or they live. Millennials, they're living with their family, their parents for forever. But at least they have a home. They're not on the streets. So that is the point where people struggled. There was no social security. There was none of that. You worked, and if you didn't work, you died. And even if you worked super, super hard, you sometimes still died because shit was just so tough. So anyway, the point is, this is the first time in human existence where most of us, at least in the Western countries, have these 2 points. Now, if we go back to the next one, the next top one, so we go up the pyramid. So we started at the bottom. Now we're on our way up. So belongingness and love needs. This is intimate relationships and friends. This is a psychological need. Again, people, I'm sure they had friends and they had spouses and they loved each other, but that was not important. Not as important as bleeding yourself. Now, we look for love. We marry for love. We choose who we marry. Again, back in the day, a lot of the times were arranged marriages, and in some countries today there still are arranged marriages. I realize that, but in the West, it's predominantly you marry who you want, or you don't marry who you want. Marriage was a strategy. There was a reason behind a marriage, and it was because it was good for the family, yada, yada, yada. And then friends, we all have friends. We need friends. I think friendship is one of the most underappreciated and undervalued things that humans do. If you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, there's a specific reason you're with them, right? And fundamentally, it's for sex. It's to reproduce. But friendship, nothing's like that. Nothing's expected. You are spending your time. You are giving them your finite time, and it's because you honestly enjoy their company, and that's kind of a beautiful thing. If we go to the next one, esteem needs, prestige and feeling of accomplishment. So these are all psychological things. You sort of see what I'm getting at. It hasn't been until probably the last 100 years for most people, and really even the last 15 to 20 years, that these psychological needs have sort of been pushed, and that we are safe. We have our needs, our basic needs met. Now we're sort of breaking out, and we're like, now what, right? Like, am I happy? What's my purpose? I want to fall in love. People fall in love. My friends, they're important. And then you get into your esteem, your prestige and feeling of accomplishment. Well, I've got a good job and I'm able to feed myself, but is it my passion? Is it what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is this where I belong? And that's sort of where that whole psychological, why are we here thing, people become a little bit more in tune with themselves. Where back in the day, they're like, I don't really give 2 shits if I'm a blacksmith, but I'm able to feed my family, and at the end of the day, everyone's alive and my children aren't dead. So that was what's important. But now we've got the first 2 needs met, and now we're sort of getting into the point where, we're starting to think we're getting too much into our own minds. And I think that's sort of where that stems, where that anxiety comes from. And also there's a lot of propaganda. You got to just follow your heart, and everybody thinks everybody's happy. There's a message that your job is supposed to be your passion, and if you're not happy at your job, then you're wasting your life. Whereas that's not what a job is for. I don't think you should want to hang yourself every time you go to work, but it's not going to be fun. Work is not fun. Work is work, and it's no matter how long. You can have the best job in the world. You can have you can be a professional beer tester, or you can be a dog trainer, somebody that eats food professionally, whatever. Eventually, everything gets old. So eventually, everything gets boring. Artists, actors, acting, being in movies is probably one of the best jobs in this world. They're handsomely paid if you're famous. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not as easy as we assume, but you're not on an oil rig. You're not underground mining coal. You're not wiping somebody's butt or ass like a lot of healthcare workers do. And you're not getting shot at. You're not a cop. You're not jumping into a burning building. It's pretty safe. But they are sometimes some of the most messed up people. Actors, they get into drugs, and it's because they have everything. They have everything, and now they're looking, the lower needs, the middle parts of the pyramid are not met. Actually, so we haven't even finished the pyramid. Let's go to the last part. Self-actualization. And this is self-fulfillment needs. Achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. And this is where the actors get into play. They have literally everything. They can buy themselves the fanciest food, the fanciest cars, houses. They can go on vacations, and they're still not happy. And why is that? It's because they have to accomplish. There's creativity. It's like they're stuck in a bubble that they just can't get out, and they don't know how to get out. Yeah. So that's where that sort of stems from, I think, anyway. And I think a big part of anxiety has to do with that. People feel anxious because we're so we have our basic needs met. Now we're in our psychological stage where we're like, we get inside our own minds, we overthink things. We're constantly on edge. Again, there's other things in society that have contributed to this, I think, anyway. But this is a huge factor, that we have everything we need fundamentally. And it's just, we're in a transitioning stage as a species. We need to grow, and we don't know how to grow, and we're pioneers. We are true pioneers in this human experience. So maybe anxiety is a normal thing. Maybe it's healthy. Maybe it's just finding a way how to deal with it. So let's get back to that article. Okay, so we talked about how it's higher in wealthier economies. When they compare to levels of depression, no single area has significantly higher rates. That's kind of interesting. But when it comes to anxiety, it's a different story. That kind of surprises me because, maybe not, because true depression is a lack of dopamine, whereas anxiety, I think, is a little bit different. Let's see. So anxiety tends to be less common in older adults, also because the average age of the U.S. individual is slowly rising. The percentage of people with anxiety disorders may gradually decline. Potentially. I see a lot of elderly people with plenty of anxiety. But again, you think maybe the older generation, they did without a lot. They fought world wars. They were in the war. Some of them went through the Great Depression, or at least grew up shortly thereafter in times of war. That maybe they lost their father at a young age. Maybe they never met their father. That couldn't have been very easy. They sort of, as a lot of people call them, the greatest generation. So I think the whole spare the rod, what is that saying? Spare the rod, spoil the child. That's a huge philosophy, right? You're spoiling your child and not providing any discipline. And they're the exact opposite of that. So those types of people, I think, inherently are just stronger individuals. And then sort of every generation, therefore, after has gotten weaker and weaker. So they say. Now, this next heading is anxiety. Is anxiety increasing in the U.S.? So, the American Psychiatric Association ran a poll on 1,000 U.S. residents in 2017. I'm going to add, not a huge sample size, but anyway. They found that nearly 2/3 were extremely or somewhat anxious about health and safety for themselves and their families, and more than a third are more anxious overall than last year. So this was 2017. This was the election. This was the year after the election. So I think we're just in an age where a lot of people are scared. I'm not going to say my political beliefs, but it's obvious that people people are obsessed with politics, and people think that it's the end of the world. Everyone's obsessed with the end of the world. You know, no matter who would have been elected, I think this would have been the exact same, since it was so polar split. You either hated the person or loved the person who was elected. And that's a little fucked up, if you ask me. So people are so obsessed with politics, so that's always on their mind. It makes people miserable and it drives them crazy. So I'm going to suggest that maybe that has to do something. And they also noted that millennials were the most anxious generation, which is no surprise, because we have a great stereotype, warranted probably, that we have no coping skills. Our hands were held, we were, the snowflakes, we were given participation medals and trophies and stuff like that, and we weren't allowed to fail. We weren't allowed to be on our own. We weren't allowed to go outside and play. We couldn't develop healthy. I don't know if that's a word. Anyway, so yeah, we're the most anxious generation. So it's no doubt that when you're coddling a child, and I still call a lot of millennials children because they still live at home. They don't have jobs. All they do is tweet and go on Instagram and Facebooks and all that shit and complain. And I'll say it. It's because it's true. I'm a millennial and I see it with people in my own generation, and it's sad. In 2018, the same poll was repeated, and anxiety was shown to have risen by another 5%. No surprise. So millennials were revealed to still be the most anxious generation. Yeah. It's crucial to remember, though, the increasing feelings of anxiety does not equate to a diagnosis of anxiety disorder. And I'm glad they actually mentioned that. That's quite honest, because a lot of people say they have anxiety. I've got an anxiety disorder. Well, were you diagnosed? Well, I just didn't have time to go to the doctor. It's like, okay, sure you didn't. Anyway, naturally, it's possible to feel more anxious than you previously did without being classified as a mental condition. Sure, fair enough. Everybody has changes in their life. Maybe you had a bad year, but I think politics is a huge thing, making people anxious, because they dedicate their entire life and their whole focus, and they get off to politics. So if their person is not in power, then they are sad, and it's shitty. Now, the article does go on and talk about a genetic link to it, which, I'm not really interested in reading that. It's such a long article that I think we'll skip that. But if you want to read it, again, the link's in the description. Okay, this is an interesting part. This heading is, why does the U.S. society breed anxiety? Now, this is the most academically and honest sentence, I think, in this entire article. Like, I applaud this. A lot of articles nowadays, they are driven by politics, right? So they're not intellectually honest, but this is quite beautiful, actually. Before we dive into the next section, we must make it clear that there's no definitive answer to this question. Many people have offered insight, be backed by evidence or not. The answer is likely to be complex in the extreme mishmash of all facets in modern life and societal pressures. So this article is already saying we don't know, and it's impossible to pinpoint it, which is great, because 100% I have to agree. Yeah, there is no one answer. The world is not black and white, and there's a lot of gray in it. So no two people are the same. No two people's experiences are the same. No two people's experiences of anxiety are the same. So therefore, it's unlikely that there will be an answer that fits all sizes. But there's a range of theories that attempts to explain why anxiety might be creeping steadily into the foreground. First one is a shift in society. Just like I said, there is less pressures to survive now that food and water are so abundant. They argue that we focus on extrinsic desires like the new car, the big house, rather than intrinsic desires. including the joys of family and friends and meeting with others in the community. How often do you see people texting and sitting together in a group? They're not, those are so shallow conversations that you're having over text. Face to face, enjoying a conversation with somebody, giving them your finite time. No matter what you do, no matter how good technology gets, unless you get to the point of AI, being able to interact, and that's debatable whether that will ever happen. A human can learn, and a human can offer counterpoint and counter argument. There's nothing in this world that can do that, but humans, and luckily there are so many of us, so you can get different opinions. But you can't have a conversation with a computer, and if you can, I know there's like those, what is it, the bots, the Google bots or whatever, smart bots, but again, they're predictive, and they can have somewhat conversations, but nothing on the deep level like a human can. So that's one thing, I think. Minimalism is a great way to counteract this society. People are focusing on people and not things, and you're not forcing yourself to go without items, but you are shifting your mindset to not wanting the items, so you don't feel like you're going out, or going without, rather. One study published in the 1990s, again, it's kind of weird that they're citing something from the 90s because it's so old, but they found that people who pursued money, looks, and status were more likely to feel anxious and depressed. Yeah, of course, because money doesn't talk to you, and looks eventually fade. Not saying that looks aren't important, but excuse me. But if you focus everything on looks and nothing else, then you're going to be a very uninteresting person, and nobody's going to want to talk to you who's actually worth your time. Yeah. The next one is living alone. Now this is quite interesting because this is something that I never actually thought about. But people are much more likely to live alone than they were 50 years ago because apartments are they're reasonable, at least. Back in the day, you couldn't live alone because you couldn't afford it. But in the U.S., in 1960, under 7% of adults lived alone. By 2017, that figure is scored to well over 1/3 of adults. That's huge. Huge. And why is that? I think it's because people are entitled. They feel like they should have their own space. People want their own space. People want more. Could this be playing a part, the art of class? Of course. Because we're not supposed to live alone. We're social creatures. Humans are social. Even the most antisocial person, they still need human connection. There's a reason why, what is that when you throw in prisons? Solitary confinement. There's a reason why solitary confinement is a punishment. It's because humans crave socialization. They crave touch. They crave communication. And yeah, it's just, it's crazy. And I lived alone too for a brief period. And at first, I loved it. You love your own space. You've got your own thing. You can do whatever you do. You come and go as you please. But after a while, it's sad, especially if you don't have friends nearby you. So then you find yourself playing a lot of video games, watching a lot of movies, and that's not healthy either. So I can understand, like, if you're already prone to depression or anxiety, then absolutely living alone. Another point this article makes is social media. Now, this is one of my favorite ones. I love blaming social media, and I don't know why. I think it's because in a lot of ways it's so inherently evil. There's a lot of good, obviously, connecting and stuff like that, but it's when people start to obsess about it, and everybody's noticed that everyone uses social media. This is YouTube, technically. This is a form of social media, so I'm not innocent either, and neither are you if you're listening to it. But again, it's moderation, right? So some others have looked at the impact of social media on mental health. After all, social media has flooded society so thoroughly in such a short space of time, it's highly unlikely to have had no impact at all. of course. Facebook was founded in 2004. Today, almost 1.5 billion people use it at least once per day. That's crazy. So one singular standalone website is now pursued by 1 in 5 people globally. Not even the first world countries, globally. So, for instance, one that investigated social media use, sleep, and mental health in over 400 Scottish adolescents, I guess, revealed that those who use social media the most, particularly at night, had lower self-esteem and higher levels of anxiety and depression. That's interesting. Anxiety, I'm not exactly sure. I guess maybe it's because of sleep. My thoughts were always that you're so focused on other people, and people choose what they put on social media, right? So you see everybody having these luxurious lives, these vacations, and all these beautiful pictures that they actually took 17 of them and filtered the shit out of that one and got the perfect look and the perfect lighting and everything like that to make it look perfect. And then you're seeing this and you're like, oh my god, they just came out of the shower like that. That's just them naturally. And look how much fun they're having. I wish I was having that much fun. And then that stems anxiety, and that stems depression and everything like that. But then turns out that person who posted it is feeling the exact same way about somebody else on their social media, and then it's just a forever loop of depression, anxiety, and a shitstorm. So that's my thoughts about that one. And I think that's sort of what this article talks about. So they link it to, they do mention a few articles. Before we throw Facebook and their staff to the lions, we need to remember the cause and the effect cannot be established on the vast majority of these studies. No, of course. Nothing I said I don't think is written in this article, but I think that's a huge point. One thing they do suggest, it's maybe that anxious people go to social media because, well, they're anxious, so they don't want to go outside in real life, so they seek their social behavior through social media. Maybe that's part of it, but I think it could be that, but also associated with mine, and they feel bad because they're not social. When in reality, reading a book is just totally okay. It's totally fine. It's 100% normal. If you're not one of those girls that goes and party, oh my god, and go like get shots of tequila at the bar, if that's not you, that's fine. It's not healthy anyway. I'd much rather talk to the person who stays home and reads a book at night than going and partying. I think that's way healthier anyway. But the behavior on social media does not gratify those who do that. It makes it suggest that this specific behavior is normal and that that's the way you should be. And then the last bit of this article just suggests that maybe life is just more stressful. Yeah, we don't have to worry about dying every day, but in a lot of ways we are. Commuting. People drive half an hour every day in a car to get to work. That can't be good for you, despite, the fact that you're sedentary all day and then you're sedentary for another hour, and then nobody likes to be in a car or commuting. That sucks. And then not every kid can be the president or Beyonce after all they do say. Asking maybe we're just setting them up to fail, because we're saying if you can do anything you put your mind to it, or sorry, if you put your mind to it, you can do anything. That's not the case. We have higher expectations for a life than I think most people will actually get. And then again, people buying things and then being forced to be a wage slave. Kids at the playground are now obsessing about Donald Trump, the president. We talk about antibiotic resistance, climate change, nuclear apocalypse, flesh-eating viruses. Everything is fake news. The poor economy, everything like that. People are always they're talking about how the world's going to end, which it might, who knows, but people are talking about it so much, and that's like nobody has the time just to sit back, relax, sit on the porch, have a cup of tea, and just be in nature and just relax, read a nice book, have a nice conversation. We're not doing that. We're all jerking it to whatever Donald Trump said, or whatever Hillary Clinton said, or whatever the Kardashians say, and everything is so shallow and meaningless. And I think that's, at the end of the day, one of the biggest causes, that and everything else, right? So everything in this article sort of says that in a little bit different sense. At least that's the way I understand it. But I think if you are an anxious person, sort of learning about this and self-reflecting and maybe trying to get away from things, because people are so quickly to just jump on, oh, I need Ativan, or I need Zoloft, or I need something, some sort of antidepressant or anti-anxiety med, and that's not helping either, because when you introduce a substance into the brain stops making it, right? So the reason why drugs are so addictive is because like heroin, let's say, or meth, you take it, it increases your dopamine level super, super high. That's the feel-good chemical. And then when your body processes it and there's no more heroin in the body, you get these lows, and you're like, oh, because all the dopamine in your brain no longer makes dopamine because you're putting a shitload of in it. Same thing with Zoloft or any of these meds. People are so quickly to give these meds, doctors are so quick to give these antidepressants and these anti-anxiety meds, that when people are on these short-term little areas, these short-term these low points in their life, that now they actually need these meds to cope. And these meds are made for a reason. I think they do have a purpose for specific types of people, but maybe not everybody. What are your thoughts? Go read the article and let me know what you think. I'm curious, actually. So we have time for one more. What are we at? 41 minutes. This is a new record. Look at us go. So this one from CNN. Speaking of fake news, right? I'm just kidding. Okay, so this is CNN Health. Low testosterone or male menopause, no longer just for older men, which we've actually seen a lot. There's one website, what is it out there? Hims.com or something. They specifically, they're for men, actually, and it's for hair loss and all that sort of problems. But one of the things they talk about is ED, erectile dysfunction, and they advertise it not only for like 50, 60, 70-year-old men, but like people under 30 or 40, and it's like, no, you should be getting boners quite easily, especially in your 20s. Like that should be no problem. But I guess obviously this service is needed. It's warranted because these things are happening. I'm nothing against them, but the fact that this service is needed, there's a reason, right? And it's scary. So, be lucky, I guess, if you don't have that problem. Okay, so this is a CNN. I don't know who's talking. By Ian Kerner, CNN? I don't know. So in my practice, I've noticed an increasing number of younger guys are complaining of sexual concerns, such as diminished libido, erectile problems, more commonly seen in older men. Just said that. Ooh, I'm psychic, maybe. Some clinicians believe that the factors are likely obesity, stress, inadequate sleep probably play a role in these issues. It's not purely a lifestyle issue. These factors are also possible cause of low levels of the hormone testosterone, which can influence sexual function. That's the hormone that makes men, right? Low T is still common in older men, of course, because they don't need to reproduce anymore. They're past the point. They've already done their thing. So that's normal. But it's known as male menopause or andropause. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Gradual decrease in testosterone typically occurs steadily over time. Right? Total sense. As you get older, your testosterone lowers. That's kind of why men get boobs, and they just as you get a little bit older, you just become more soft. You become more sensitive. And that's probably why, because the testosterone makes you angry and shit, and maybe there's another thing, but you do lose 3% reduction in testosterone after the age of 40, according to this article. It's cool. And then after the age of 60, about 20% of men experience andropause. Totally normal stuff. They say that low testosterone isn't necessarily just a consequence of aging. A number of factors of an impact a man's testosterone levels. A lot of people write about food, energy, nutrition, genetics, health, blah, 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 blah. So one option for low testosterone is prescription replacement therapy, but this approach can have worrisome side effects such as decreased sperm production and shrinkage of the testicles. Now, why does that happen? Testosterone is like all hormone, has multiple actions on the body and on the mind. In my opinion, this is not me saying, this is the article, should be taken and prescribed only to correct deficiency documented by appropriate blood tests. Fair enough. So why do you think that happens? Well, again, I talked about it earlier with the meds. If you're replacing hormones or neurotransmitters in the instance for anxiety and depression medication, the body stops making it. So where is testosterone made? It's in the testes. So all that sort of thing, right? So there's always side effects to everything, every drug you take. Sometimes the benefits outweigh, right? So they talk about exercise. You may associate increased testosterone levels with athleticism, but not all physical activity is created equally. Endurance cardio, such as running, actually lowers testosterone productions. And lifting weights using large muscles can increase it. Deadlifts and squats are excellent for this purpose. That's pretty cool. I guess that's why men generally prefer lifting and hate cardio. That's funny. That's actually kind of interesting. I didn't know that. Not that I'm condoning not running, but again, exercise, any kind of exercise is great, I think. Especially weights. Men have to lift weights. You need to do this. This is something, I don't care who you are. You got to lift weights. You got to be strong. For straight men anyway, women want a strong man. They want somebody who can protect them inherently. And how do you show that? It's by being strong. You don't have to be the most ripped guy in the world. You don't got to be a Dwayne Johnson or a John Cena or whomever, but you got to at least look half good naked, right? And you got to be strong. So nutrition. This is the next part. Any diet that promotes obesity and insulin resistance will lower testosterone because fat cells act like a sponge soaking up testosterone, making it less freely available. There's a lot of fat people out there. Just saying. For peak testosterone production, some carbs are necessary, but preferably slowly metabolized kinds of high-fiber fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. Comes to fat, research shows that saturated fats from grass-fed meats, coconut oil, macadamia nuts appear to support testosterone. Cool. Yeah, so everything's connected, right? They talk about grass-fed. This is something that I sort of leaned on. A lot of the meat we have now is corn-fed because corn is so much easily accessible. It's easy to grow. And grass is it takes a little bit longer and you need more room, right? You think of the grass-fed cows on a farm and there's so many people nowadays and there's so much consumption. Like we eat so much and we waste so much that they've had to find a way to feed these animals something else, and it's corn, which there's a lot of problems with that. So that specifically grass-fed was interesting that they did mention that because it is more sort of an organic kind of normalcy. This is, again, something that we sort of come back to, is that what's normal? What is the world been doing forever? What were we evolved to do? We were evolved to eat low sugar. We were evolved to eat meat, plants, fruit. And then we're sort of going crazy out of our normalcy and what our genetics is saying. And nothing's, the corn, like that's one of these, I'm just going to drop the whole corn thing. But anyway, my point is that we're getting away from what's supposed to be our normal, what we evolved doing. We're getting away from that, and now we're finding all these problems, and we always ask ourselves, well, what's going on? Why is this happening? This is probably what's happening. Sleep and stress. Improved sleep hygiene is important. Most people produce between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. So If you're waking up early for work, that sucks. Shutting off your phone and tablet and other electronic devices after 8 or 9 p.m. because the blue light it can interfere with sleep. Yes, it stops you from creating melatonin, which helps you fall asleep normal. Taking a warm shower, keeping your bedroom comfortable at a low room temperature, about 70 degrees, can also improve your sleep. So sleep is normal. I think sleep is something that generally people are getting less of. Less sleep. People are getting less sleep. Yeah, that's too bad because it's so important. We live in such a busy lifestyle that, people are sacrificing sleep. We're just getting away from what's really important. And then they talk about supplements, which I don't really care too much about. So this is the whole soy boy sort of persona, right? That's what they call them now, right? The people who are growing up on soy, they don't eat meat, they the low testosterone. That's where that whole sort of notion has come from, regardless whether it's true or not. But I think what we need to just do, and this goes for the anxiety, this goes for everything, is try to live as close to the earth and as close to what feels right, what we know works. Think about it. Did we have this 100 years ago? Not 100. Let's go even further back. Let's go like 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, was this something we had? And then think about the possible complications of that, right? The fast food burger, yes, it's cheap, but what's actually in it? And we think fat. We think, this is going to cause fat. Well, there's other repercussions of that. There's the processedness, and what's it going to do for your liver? What's it going to do for your kidneys? What chemicals are they putting into this? What kind of hormones? That's another one people talk about is chicken, right? They put estrogen in the chicken to make their breasts bigger because you want to be able to get more bang for your buck. If you're going to slaughter a chicken for its breast and you want a big breast, you're going to put estrogen to make bigger breasts. I said breast a lot there. Non-sexually, though. Entirely for educational reasons. But again, maybe that's it, where the meat gets this estrogen after being injected, the live chickens, and now we're eating this, and then things like that. So there's a lot of things. I'd be curious actually to look at some of the studies, which it might be something I'm going to look into, because I have seen documentaries and they've suggested this. They've also suggested that's the reason why women or girls really are hitting puberty earlier. Even 100 years ago, girls would hit puberty 13, 14 years of age. Now it's like 9. They're getting their period. It's like you're like in grade 3, grade 4. It's like that's it's not right. But maybe that's it. So if you can take any takeaway from this, is just try to live close to the earth. Try to do what's normal. Sugar, I believe, is one of the biggest killers, because it's in everything. They are cutting fat from things and just replacing with sugar. I don't think the body is made to digest that much sugar, especially processed sugar. Yeah, fruits and vegetables have natural sugars. But the way like having such a huge spike in the processed sugar, the body and the cortisol levels, and increases the risk of, it's just all connected. I'm going to stop. I'm rambling. So it's just just a lot of problems in this world. Now I'm starting to feel anxious. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this. I'm hopefully only going to get better with practice. It's pretty hard to ramble on for an hour by yourself, but hopefully this didn't turn to be a huge waste of time and flaming piece of garbage. But regardless, it's practice and it's kind of fun, almost therapeutic actually. You guys should try this. Yeah, it's good therapy. Instead of paying somebody $100 an hour to talk to, just talking to a microphone. Anyway, like I said, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Hope you enjoy it. I am going to be making this into bite-sized pieces. So if this is way too long for you, which I don't really blame you, you'll be able to catch those hopefully within the next few days. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.